The Democratic Alliance has written to Parliament to request an inquiry into government's handling of the COVID-19 vaccine program. The DA says government's failure to organize an efficient and effective rollout cannot be ignored. For more on this, I'm joined by the DA Shadow Minister of Health, Siviwe Gwarube. Siviwe, thank you so much for your time on the lead this afternoon. What do you want this parliamentary committee to investigate exactly?
Thanks, Clement, and good afternoon to your viewers. Clement, it's quite important that as Parliament we start the work of investigating essentially South Africa's response in terms limited essentially to the vaccine rollout plan, from firstly the acquisition of the vaccine and itself, the rollout itself up until this point. The reality is that we are aware that there's been a number of both avoidable and unavoidable delays in the rollout of the vaccine. We are nowhere where we should be. We are literally in the bottom 30 of countries on the African continent who are rolling out our vaccines. And of course, there's been a number of mishaps, including the J&J matter over the weekend. But all of these things are compounded by the fact that there's been some really glaring mistakes by government where they have failed essentially in their executive function. And it's then incumbent on Parliament, as empowered by the rules of Parliament, to investigate who should be held accountable, what has gone wrong, and instead of South Africa piecing together what is publicly available in the public domain.
So the Health Minister, Zweli Mkhize, has already explained to the Health Portfolio Committee what the rollout plan has been so far and when they started negotiating with vaccine manufacturers. Do you believe that there's actually more that we don't know?
Absolutely. I think there's absolutely way more than we don't know. I mean, to this point, I mean, Clement, you yourself would know, I mean, even the cost of some of the doses of the vaccines are often kept under wraps because of certain NDAs that government has to sign. You know, even when the Democratic Alliance took government to court earlier this year, when the court compelled government to give a timeline of what their vaccine rollout would look like. Again, it was non-committal and it was quite vague. And I think there's a lot more that we don't know that has gone behind the scenes. And of course, it's quite important that Parliament gets to the bottom of this, because I think that we will see some rank ineptitude on the side of government, and where we will also see where there's been some genuine unfortunate series of events, for instance, like the issues of the vaccines that the FDA announced over the weekend. So I think there's a number of things, but what we cannot do is we can't as Parliament be piecing together pieces of information and that we get dropped all over the show on media, whereas we should be asking the questions and holding people accountable for their actions. This is exactly what the Deputy Justice Zondo said precisely at the Zondo Commission, that in effect Parliament aided and abetted state capture because of its failure to hold government to account, and we can't let that happen once again.
You've mentioned in your statement that the consequences of the slow pace is loss of life, the stress, this isolation of trying to avoid infection until vaccines arrive. What do you want to see as consequences for government's failure to speed up the vaccine rollout? Because the health department wasn't the sole department that is responsible here. You had Treasury as well that was also missing some deadlines. So what is accountability to you? What are you looking at?
And that is why, essentially, Clement, we've asked Parliament for an ad hoc committee, as opposed to simply saying that this is work that should be carried out by the Portfolio Committee of Health, because we're of the view that this has been almost a government response. And I think that the failure can be seen on multiple levels. And that's why we want a committee that is multi-party, that will cover various departments, so we can be able to see exactly where things went wrong. And we want to be able to have a very open and honest investigation about when did we start to negotiate with the manufacturers, where did we miss payments, when were those payments due, when did we know that we needed to tap into the COVAX facility, what were some of the opportunities that were missed, if there were any, it's absolutely important that Parliament inserts itself in that, because otherwise then we sit back, we don't know what the work of the IMC is. We are yet to be addressed by the Deputy President on the work of the Interministerial Committee, which was put together. Ultimately, there's a lot more that South Africans are not getting when it comes to this vaccine rollout. And like I said, there are things, of course, that have been unavoidable, but we definitely of the view that there are things that have been avoidable that government is culpable for. And ultimately, we need to get to the bottom of it. And by accountability, Clement, we need to be able to hold people accountable, because they've been entrusted by the country to lead one of the most important public health responses since 1994. So it's absolutely important that we identify where things went wrong so that we can unlock where delays are, and also we can hold people accountable where they've dropped the ball.
Yeah, you've actually just reminded me about that interministerial committee that is supposed to be led, or is being led, by the Deputy President. I had completely forgotten about that. When was the last time they actually addressed the nation, or they gave us an update as to how the program is going? Government may argue, Siviwe, that, look, this is out of our control, especially now with the J&J vaccines. They will argue that we are affected by decisions that are taken at these manufacturing plants. The FDA in the US, for instance, the pace of distribution is out of our control. Some countries purchased a lot of vaccines, so they hogged them. So you can't really put the responsibility solely on us.
Absolutely, and that's why, I've been absolutely intentional about being fair about this, because of course there are things that have been unavoidable that government has had to deal with in this response. And right at the beginning, I think South Africans were understanding that this is a forever dynamic environment, this is a forever changing environment where there are things that the South African government may not be able to control. But for instance, the issue around the contamination and the announcement by the FDA, or the issue around us getting a variant which and the AstraZeneca doses, which were deemed to be ineffective against that variant. Those are various things, Clement, that government can really say, look, I mean, this is what the science was showing us. This is what we could do at the time, and this is we don't have the benefit of hindsight. However, we are fully aware that there are multiple decisions along the way which have been questionable, which have not been properly communicated, and it's high time that Parliament seizes itself with the idea of getting to grips with this crisis, because essentially the institution can't be relegated to just a stakeholder that needs to be pacified through questions to the President once a quarter, through questions to the Minister, or appearances in committee meetings. Yeah. Parliament, it's high time that members of Parliament get stuck into the work of government, and they do what they've been elected to do, which is holding government to account on behalf of the people of South Africa. Failure to do so is failure to represent people effectively.
As members of Parliament and as opposition parties, are you aware of the progress or the work that the Deputy President and his team have been doing, having led this interministerial committee looking at the vaccine rollout? I mean, I'm looking at what the President said in January when he announced this, and he said the strategy has already been developed and they will be dealing with the actual mechanisms of ensuring that the whole process of vaccination is done and is done well. Have you been given an update as to the progress of that committee?
No. I mean, we are yet to even be addressed by the entire committee itself. I mean, the committee, Clement, was announced, and the President made this announcement that the Deputy President would be leading this interministerial committee. There's about 16 departments that form part of that IMC. And, once again, when this was announced, one of the things that we called for was a committee that would essentially mirror that committee from Parliament's side, that would mirror the various departments. Because once again, it's absolutely critical to make sure that we are getting to grips with what government is doing. This committee has yet to even announce what business they are busy with. Even now, with the announcements around the FDA saga, it is absolutely unclear to us what the committee does, what it's been busy with in the past couple of months, and what kind of things have they done to unlock the processes and some of these things that have been locked up and delayed. And so really, what is the point then? And that's why it's absolutely important to then get to the bottom of this and literally go through every decision-making process that has been done thus far, and also in terms of the rollout, so that, again, Clement, this is not just a matter of looking backwards, but this is also a matter of saying, where are the delays? Why are we delaying in terms of vaccinating people? Countries with the same socioeconomic status as us are literally vaccinating people in their hundreds of thousands. We're falling behind. At some point, we've got to take accountability and stop saying, well, it's first world countries that are hogging the vaccines, because there are countries on the African continent that are doing way better than we are doing. And so at some point, we've got to figure out exactly where things have gone wrong. Where do we unlock the things that have gone wrong? And Parliament has the precedent. We did it with ESCOM. Some of that evidence was handed over to the Zondo Commission. And so there is precedent for this kind of work.